So welcome everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for today's chat on travel insurance with cancer and COVID. So it's a complicated picture that we're working on today, but we're really grateful to have Fiona Macrae with us. And Fiona has been a great friend of Shine's for many years. And what we're going to do is I'm going to hand over to Fiona. She'll tell you a little bit about her story and kind of her interest in travel insurance and her knowledge of travel insurance. And then we will move on to some COVID specific questions. And then I've got questions that you submitted when you registered, and then we can also open it out to your questions. And we will be done by 2. But obviously, if you've got questions afterwards to follow up with, you can get in touch with us or with Fiona. So Fiona, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
Do you want to just kick off by telling us a little bit about yourself and how you kind of got involved in cancer and travel insurance?
I will do. Right, so I was diagnosed with breast cancer 17 years ago when my baby was, my 17-year-old son now, was 5 months old. And I was going through my treatment. I was an insurance broker. And when I was going through all my treatment, I had, excuse me, I had all my chemotherapy first. And then when I finished that, my oncologist said to me, right, that's fine, time to go off and be a little family, try and have a holiday, come back, we'll do the surgery, radiotherapy, and we'll move on with the rest of your treatment. Okay, that's great. I couldn't get any travel insurance, and we only wanted to go to the south of France, and nobody would insure me because I hadn't actually had the cancer removed. And I was deemed this massive risk. And because I understood risk and insurance, and I just couldn't understand why I was so uninsurable just because I hadn't had my cancer removed, because they were insuring just my holiday, not my life at this stage. So that's what got me thinking, and I just thought, right, things need to change. And the more research I did into it, I just thought it wasn't me that had a problem. Everybody with cancer had a problem trying to get travel insurance after they'd been diagnosed. So fast forward a couple of years, and I created a brand called Insurance With, and it was created to help people with cancer and all other medical conditions find fair, affordable travel insurance that's actually rated on their risk. And we did this by creating our own medical screening system where we ask more questions so we can actually understand the person and a more detailed risk on where you are. So, you know, I might have a life-limiting condition, but that doesn't mean I'm uninsurable to travel because I have spells of, you know, being very stable. So fast forward again to a year ago, and I was diagnosed with secondary breast cancer. So again, that was a bit of a shock for me. But again, it's sort of fueled my interest again in travel insurance for people with secondary cancers living with treatment all the time. And that's something that I'm working on now to make sure that those rates still stay affordable and accessible, and the underwriters are actually looking at the risk, i.e. I'm working full time, I'm quite stable. Why can't I go on holiday and not be charged thousands of pounds? So that's a bit of a whistle-stop tour on me. So there's, over the years that I've been doing this, there's loads and loads of issues that people have found trying to get travel insurance. And mainly it's being able to access it, to be able to find it. And lots of people think they're uninsurable once they're diagnosed with cancer because they'll go to the mainstream provider, somebody that they've always used, and they'll be declined outright. Their banks stop covering them when on their package bank accounts because they've got cancer. And it just becomes quite difficult to find. You go through a comparison site and you could be charged thousands of pounds. And you try all the different comparison sites, and the prices are always the same. So then everybody thinks, right, that's it, I'm uninsurable. But I'm here to say that no, you're not, and I'm here to help you find the best place to cover you. I'm not here to sell you insurance with. I actually now do travel insurance explained, so it's helping people understand travel insurance, although Insurance With is always my baby, and I still keep a very watchful eye on it. but I want to help people find the right travel insurance for them, and that's what I'm here to help you do. So yeah. So that's,
and so I know you've been working. I mean, I think a lot of people don't kind of understand, and I certainly still find it confusing. But you have travel insurance and you have underwriters, and the underwriters play quite a important role. And I know you've done some work developing. Is that protective? Is that
yes,
the
that's
underwriter
correct.
as well?
Yeah.
Do you want to just say a little bit about that, because that might be interesting for people to understand, I think.
Yeah, so we've created, and it started with Insurance With, and other brands also use Protective now, and it's a different medical screening system from the one that all the comparison sites use, and it asks more questions. It understands more about the risk, how you are as a person, and understanding how you're actually.
He's up closer to Tyler, His Lordship, the Canadian who won.
Someone watching the Olympics.
I can't be as entertaining as those, I'm afraid. Yeah, so we can really understand the person that's applying for the travel insurance, understand how they're reacting to their actual treatment. And as we know, when we have cancer, we take treatment for the cancer, but then we also have to take other tablets for the side effects the treatment gives us, and then you've got side effects from those tablets, and it's more tablets, and it's about really understanding how people manage with those conditions without just blanketly saying, you've got cancer, you've got secondary cancer, you're going to die, you're all in one group, and that's just not the case, and that's what we're trying to get people to look at. And part of the campaign that I'm working on, and again now with Travel Insurance Explained, is to try and get the rest of the market to understand what we're doing and follow what we're doing and understand cancer properly. It's complex, but it's treatable, and people can live with a secondary cancer diagnosis for many, many years and be very stable. And travel insurance just needs to catch up with that, and understand that, and understand, the risks now are so much more reduced than they were years and years, 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah. So I think actually, just while we're talking about that kind of specific issue about, because you're looking really, when you're looking at travel insurance, you're looking at someone, like you said, to insure your trip, not to insure your life forever, right?
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering, I know one of the things that you always say, though, is that it's really important to ensure that your cancer is included in your travel insurance, because sometimes people will say, oh, well, I have cover through my bank, but it excludes my cancer, but that's fine. I'll just use that. And that's often not a very good idea.
No, so as I touched on earlier about the side effects from the medication, and then the side effects from the medication for the side effects, they all cause these side effects. So, for example, the medication I'm on now makes my immune system lower, and it can also cause diarrhea. So if I go on holiday and I pick up an infection, I get diarrhea, and I haven't declared my cancer, none of that's going to be covered. Now, if I need to go into hospital and have fluids and things like that, it's not going to be covered. I might be able to manage in the hotel on my own with the prophylactic antibiotics that I've brought with me, but it's not something I personally want to take a risk on, because I know how quickly things can change with a lower immune system. So you've got to be, really careful. So it's about making sure that you do declare your cancer, because it's not just the cancer that it's not just cancer you're excluding, it's cancer or anything that can be attributed to the treatment of your cancer.
Right. Even so many years
it's quite
later.
Broad. It's quite broad.
Okay. And even many years later, that can be an
yes
issue.
I mean, so when I was still on medication on tamoxifen for my primary diagnosis, so part of tamoxifen side effects is that it can cause DVT. Now, if I hadn't told them about my primary breast cancer, even though it was more than 5 years ago, but I was still taking my tamoxifen and I had a DVT, that wouldn't be covered, because I'm taking that tablet as a treatment for the cancer that I hadn't told them about.
Yeah. Great. Okay. No, I think that makes sense.
Mhm.
So in terms of COVID then, so you've had a cancer diagnosis, you want to go on
Yeah,
holiday, and now we're in a global pandemic. So
yeah.
obviously there's a lot of kind of complications around that, even just for the average person. And I
Mhm.
think one of the things people are really confused about is the kind of the red, green, and amber list that the government has, and
Mhm.
what happens if that changes after you've booked a holiday or while you're on holiday. Does insurance cover you for those kinds of changes?
No, so at the moment, and there's no travel insurance provider that's going to cover you for changes in government advice. The reason for that is that there is financial protection elsewhere for that risk. So travel insurers could cover it and charge accordingly for it, and it'd be quite a high risk, and it could cost quite a lot of money. But the chances are that the person has got financial cover for that somewhere else. And that'll be because if, all of a sudden, if the country goes onto the red list and the FCO says all but essential travel, nobody can travel to that country, the airline should be refunding your travel, should be offering to move your flights. If you've got a package holiday booked, that should automatically be cancelled, a refund offered, or you're offered to move your dates again. So at this time, because there's no cover for changes in government advice, I always recommend people, if you do want to go on holiday, book a package deal. You might not ever want to do that because you want to do your own thing. But if you want a holiday at the moment, until this is all sorted out, until we're a lot clearer about the government and how they're changing advice, I would always urge people, if you're that desperate for a holiday, book a package holiday, because then your money is protected, because you're not going to get a travel insurance policy to protect that aspect of it.
And your Airbnb that you've booked in the south of France, I guess they might not be under an obligation to change your dates if you can't go.
No, none whatsoever, because they can say, well, it's not my fault you can't travel.
Yeah.
It's not in our terms and conditions. Or there's lots of hotel booking sites that you don't pay until you leave, and you've got 24 hours cancellation. Maybe look for those. I know, a
Yeah.
booking.com, for example, is one that I use, because you can cancel 24 hours before you turn up
Yeah. Okay. No,
and get
that's
all your money back.
so now, also lots of people getting pinged at the moment from the COVID app.
Yes.
So what if you are about to go on holiday and you get pinged?
Okay.
Does
So
it
it'll
matter?
surprise you to hear that this isn't simple either. So there's two different types of pinging. So there's it's officially being contacted by the track and trace and being told to isolate. Then there's being pinged.
Okay.
If you're officially contacted by email or by phone call by the track and trace system, you can get travel insurance to cover that. If you're pinged, at the moment, when I was looking last week, it might have changed this week. I was looking last week. I can't find a wording that would cover you if you were pinged and get told to isolate. So at the moment, that I don't think that's covered. But that's not to say it won't be, because it's only come into being in the last couple of weeks. So insurers now will be going, there's something else we need to do. It's a slightly bigger risk than actually physically being contacted and told to isolate, because there's more and more people, it's happening to more and more people. So it's a bigger risk. So that's probably going to cost more money. So I would imagine that's what's getting looked at the moment. But as of last week, I couldn't see anybody that specifically would cover pinging. But there is cover for people if you're contacted by track and trace. So
And I
not simple.
actually, so I know somebody that this just happened to. And what was interesting was there was then a discussion then about, well, if you get pinged, is that are you legally obliged? But then what they were
Yeah.
saying was that actually the airline, I think they were flying to France, the airline asked them to kind of legally promise that they hadn't been in touch with anyone with COVID in the last 14 days. So Yeah, whether it was covered by insurance or not, it put them in a very difficult position.
Yeah.
They couldn't go on their holiday because they would have had to lie and say they hadn't been near someone with COVID when they knew they had been. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And then infected a whole plane.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. So you don't do that, anyone.
No.
Yeah.
So, but I think that's the problem. The problem now with COVID, there's so many different emerging risks that will come up all the time, and travel insurers are just trying to play catch up to say, right, yep, we can look at that. It's probably going to cost more money, and we need to look at it, and we need to look at what the risk is. And they probably do need at least 2 or 3 weeks to get that, then change all the wordings, and then get it out again. So at the moment, we're in a bit of a because what they were busy doing was saying, well, yep, if you're contacted by track and trace, and because the big thing before was you would only be covered if somebody in your own household had COVID, and then you would be covered, and you would, and then you could cancel your holiday. And then lots of people were saying, well, no, I've got to isolate now, and I've been officially contacted. So again, that change was made. So it's just about the insurers trying to keep up.
Wow.
With
Okay.
the ever-changing landscape of COVID.
So then that kind of leads nicely to the next question, which is, in a lot of cases, or maybe all cases, I haven't been anywhere, so I don't know. You've got to do a PCR test before you go into another country, and also to come back. So what happens if you have a positive PCR test, either before you leave this country to go somewhere else, or you're in another country, you're trying to come home, and your PCR test is positive?
Okay, so failing your PCR test in this country before you go, there's cancellation cover available, and there's quite a few people offering that. That shouldn't be too difficult to find cancellation cover on this side if you fail your PCR test, even 24 hours beforehand. There is cover available. But you should be buying your travel insurance when you book the holiday, not when you failed your PCR test. That goes without saying, really. What becomes more difficult, but it is available, is if you fail your PCR test before you come home. So you've got to provide, even coming back from a green list country, you've got to provide proof of a clear PCR test to come back into the country. So you need to take that 48 hours before you leave. Now, if you fail that before you leave your destination, obviously they won't let you on the plane. So you've got to stay at your destination. Now, you won't be sick enough to, well, you hope, touch wood, you're not going to be sick enough to need hospitalization. And if you are, then that's covered under the travel insurance, and that's quite a standard cover. But you will need extra accommodation, and you'll also need to get your flights back, because you can't go on that flight. You have to now wait until you test negative. And that cover is available, but it's not available from all providers. So you've got to look and check that cover is going to be available on your travel insurance policy you buy. And it is quite important, because you're not going to get back into this country without a negative PCR test.
And is it, I don't know if you know the answer, but is it possible to find accommodation if you've tested? So you're in Italy and you're trying to get home and you test positive, but you've left your hotel. Who's going to take you in with your positive COVID test?
So that's a difficult one. I mean, you can speak to your travel insurers, and they might be able to help you. But again, they're as hamstrung as you are trying to get somebody with a positive, into a hotel. It depends on, you'd probably have to look for rented accommodation, because I don't think a hotel is going to want somebody. But in some countries, I think the way we've got the hotels set up, that you can isolate in, they might have something like that, depending on where you are. But that's always something to look at before when you're booking a holiday, something to consider. What would happen? Where would I go? And also make sure you're making those plans. It's not straightforward traveling at the moment at all. So that's something else you would need to think about before you traveled.
And you did mention hospitalization. So, I mean, obviously, I suppose a lot of people that are traveling will have been double vaccinated.
Yeah.
But if you are unlucky enough, whether you're vaccinated or not, to get seriously ill from COVID in another country, would that be covered by your travel insurance? Do you need special cover?
No, actually, that's one of the most it's one of the widest covers available now is catching COVID when you're abroad and emergency medical treatment being covered.
Okay.
So that's all covered, and it's on the majority. Yeah, it's on the majority of just double check the one that you're buying has it, but does tend to be on the majority of the travel insurance policies now.
Okay, and that would cover kind of the whole gamut of treatment, like
yeah, anything that you needed for as long as you needed the emergency treatment. Yeah.
Great.
And it should also cover not repatriation. What's it called? When you've got to recover, you can come out the hospital, but you I can't.
Like recuperation.
That's the word.
Okay.
Recuperation. So you're well enough to leave the hospital, but not well enough to fly. So they would give you a period of recuperation and supply accommodation for that as well.
Okay, great. So yeah, that is a lot to think about. That's not a
An awful lot.
straightforward trip to Paris or something, is it? It's a lot.
Yeah.
Whew, okay, so we had some other questions that were submitted when people were registering. So I'll just go through a few of these, and then if someone else, if you guys have other questions, we'll open it up for you guys to put those in the chat, or I can unmute you even so you can speak to Fiona. So one of the questions, which I think we've covered, is if you're in remission from cancer, you've been off treatment for years, do you still need to declare it? And is there any limit on how many years you need to declare it for?
You need to, the questions that you'll be asked can all be exclusive to the provider that you're going to. So you need to ask whatever they're answering truthfully. A lot of them will say if you're still in treatment, if you're still having treatment for your cancer. So a lot of cancers, people will still be in treatment many years after active treatment is finished. So you would have to still declare that cancer. But if you were, say, diagnosed 20 years ago, you've never had another bit of treatment since, the likelihood is you wouldn't need to declare that, but always check what they say. Sometimes they say, have you ever been diagnosed with cancer? Now, just because you declare the condition doesn't mean they're going to charge you extra money. It just means that they need to know about it. And the important part of that is that should something happen when you're abroad and you do need emergency medical treatment, if your medical declaration, doesn't match up with the declaration, your doctor's records, because we will always ask to have access to your doctor's records when we're okaying treatment. If that doesn't match up, it doesn't mean you're not going to be covered, but it's going to delay your treatment because they got to find out why it doesn't match up. And it could be, I just forgot to tell you, that's fine. But that could mean 12 hours wait. So we always recommend just tell them everything and let them decide what's important. And just by telling them everything doesn't mean that you're going to be charged an awful lot more money.
So a related question that we had actually was how many years post surveillance with no evidence of disease would you expect travel insurance premiums to return to normal? So
again, it depends on the insurer. So if I give my example with my bank, because I was taking a hormone therapy for 10 years after my primary diagnosis, excuse me, they wouldn't cover me under my package bank account. Although, there was no evidence, there'd been no evidence of disease for 10 years, but I was taking hormone therapy.
Yeah. So
they wouldn't cover me. But some other providers would say, 5 years. So it depends. Again, it goes back to, are you actually having treatment for that cancer or not?
And would something, because that's actually another question we had. So when they ask you, this is the question, I guess they ask if you're undergoing treatment. I'm on hormone suppression to reduce recurrence risk. Does that count?
Yes.
Okay. Because
that will throw up its own side effects and create a slightly elevated risk.
Okay.
So yeah, it needs to. So when I say slightly elevated risk, that doesn't mean you're going to be charged more money, but but if you maybe have another illness not related to cancer at all that you declare, again, the slightly elevated risk might counteract the other risk. So the insurer needs to have a full picture of your health
Yeah. Okay. So anything that you're taking that's related to your cancer, you need to
Yeah,
declare.
you need to declare.
Okay. So someone else has said, I want to climb Mount Kilimanjaro next year. Well done, whoever that person is. I had my thymoma cancer removed in March with the all clear in April. Would I be able to get insured in June 2022 for an active type of holiday?
I think so, as you alluded to earlier, Kywin, what insurers look for, or we definitely look for, is stability. So provided you've had a period of stability before you want to travel, and we normally look for at least 3 months stable on your treatment, or having no treatment and things like that, so everything's stable, then there's no reason why we wouldn't be able to offer that cover. The only thing I would say is, if you're going on an activity holiday like that, and particularly Mount Kilimanjaro, is make sure that you buy the right travel insurance. So you'll have to look for a travel insurance policy that will cover you to climb however many miles above sea level you're going to be climbing to. So you need to make sure that you've got that cover, and that doesn't come as standard. You would have to buy a top-up policy for that. But they're readily available, but just make sure that you do that as well.
Okay, so not your kind of like the one that the one that I've bought when I'm on the tube to the airport because I've forgotten my insurance. Don't buy that one.
No. You're going to need something specialist, and make sure that, I don't know, I mean, how many miles above sea level, but you can get that cover, and you need to make sure you've got that right, that cover.
Great. Okay, someone has said, if you've booked a holiday already before taking out travel insurance, will they still cover you if you can't go? So I guess actually they're saying they've booked a holiday already. They find out they can't go, and then they've bought insurance. That's not going to work, is it? You need to buy the insurance when you buy the holiday.
You need to buy the insurance, before you need to know that you can't go. So that again, that's why we always recommend, when you book your holiday, buy your insurance, because you never know what's going to happen between booking the holiday and going. Because a lot of people just think, well, I don't need it until I'm getting on that plane. But things could happen that make you need to cancel the holiday. You could be taken ill, somebody could be taken ill, your dog could be taken ill. All that can be covered, and you can cancel your holiday and get your money back if you've got travel insurance in place.
Great. So someone else has also asked about basically advice for including their plus ones on a premium. But I know you've got some specific advice about, if you are going on holiday with family members or with groups of friends, about how you organize your insurance, because being covered on different insurance policies sometimes makes it more complicated.
Yeah, so if you're the one with cancer, so you take out your insurance and you get your cancer covered, and then all your friends are traveling together, or your partner's traveling with you, and they depend on their own insurance, but they don't declare your condition. And then if you need to cancel the holiday because something's happened to you to do with your cancer, you'll get your money back, but your partner won't, because he won't have declared your condition to his travel insurance provider. So we always recommend to keep things simple. If you're all traveling together and your holiday depends on each other, so if one of you weren't to go, the other definitely wouldn't want to go, that you get the same, you get on the one travel insurance policy. Yes, it's going to mean that the person that doesn't have cancer pays slightly more money, but they're also covered for the risk of cancelling their holiday that's anything to do with your cancer. But that's what we always recommend, or else you'll be all right, but all your traveling companions could lose out if they cancel their holiday because of you.
Yeah. So I think that's really important, because I wasn't aware of that for years, despite doing these talks with you for years, that my whole family should be on the same policy. And I realized my little daughter was on a different policy than me, and we were traveling just the two of us, which wouldn't have been great. So
No.
So one of the questions that's just come up in the chat, thanks, Rosie, because this is a good question. It says, because many of us are considered clinically extremely vulnerable to COVID, will that bump up our premiums even more, even if we're double jabbed?
At the moment, no.
Okay.
Because I think they're not sure if just because we're clinically extremely vulnerable, whether we're more likely to catch COVID than somebody that's not. And because we're double jabbed, does that sort of helps us as well. So at the moment, we're not, from what we're doing, we're not looking at charging more for people that are declaring medical conditions because of COVID.
Okay.
There is a higher charge because of COVID, but it's not just for people that have medical conditions, if that makes sense. So it's everybody's getting charged more, not just us.
Sure. And I suppose, I mean, with most clinically vulnerable people, it's not that you're at higher risk of catching COVID, it's that you're at higher risk of getting sick should you catch it.
Yeah,
So
yeah. And the thing is, if regardless of how sick you get, everybody would have to cancel their holiday if they caught COVID, because they're just not allowed to travel.
Sure.
And actually catching it and being very ill abroad, again, the biggest risk for an insurer is the cancellation risk before you go.
Okay.
That's what they pay most of claims on. The higher claims obviously are medical claims, but there's not as many of them as that. So the likelihood, so that's how they weigh it up.
Yeah.
So even though you could get really sick abroad and it could cost you money, not everybody's going to be making that claim, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Got that. I think the last question I had submitted while people were registering was just about travel insurance for people who are stage 4 or living with advanced cancer. And I mean, I know you've mentioned your own situation, but maybe you could just talk a little bit about how that works. And I know you've always said stability is really important. So how does that work, you know, if you are living with a more advanced cancer diagnosis?
Mm-hmm. So, for example, you'll have your regular scans, your regular updates, and you know you'll be on treatment all the time, as I am, and provided that's stable, and your cancer is stable, you don't have to be no evidence of disease, as long as it's stable and not growing, then that's what the insurer is looking for, that bit of stability. And as you know, the minute that the cancer starts moving and changing, then they start changing up treatments. And that still doesn't mean you can't get cover. But once you start that new treatment, we would ask that you have at least 12 weeks on that new treatment so we can understand how you're getting on with the side effects and things like that before we'd be able to offer cover. So it's just making sure, as I say, that you feel as well as you can. Again, we don't want to be covering people that end up going on holiday and spending a fortnight in a foreign hospital. Nobody wants that. So we want to make sure that, you know, when people go on holiday, they feel as well as they can be. And it's about making sure they've got that stability.
And does that differ then? So that's if you're kind of on long-term treatment where you're living with cancer. If you're at a stage where you're kind of your first diagnosis, you're initially diagnosed with cancer and you're going chemo and doing treatment, can you get cover for that?
If you're on what I would call active chemo, which is the chemotherapy intravenously every 3 weeks, generally no, because that really does knock your immune system. Tablet chemo now is a lot gentler on the system. So there is, if people are having as first-line treatment tablet chemo, that is a possibility to get some cover in your week off. Because your immune system, when it's on the tablet chemo, your immune system isn't depleted as much as it would be when you're on the intravenous ones. So there is cover available in that week. Again, you wouldn't be able to get cover via the online system. You would need to call through and speak to one of our one-to-one medical underwriters who would be able to go through and understand where you are in your treatment cycle, pick the right dates for you to travel. So again, it's about making sure that you feel as well as possible when you go away as well. There's no point going away if you don't feel well.
Yeah. Great. Okay, we've had a couple of other questions. So someone said, if you've taken out cover, do you have to basically keep remembering to call and update the insurance company with changes to your situation? So, you know, for example, if you're having ongoing treatment, well, scans, and then something changes, do you need to then call the insurance company and update them to let them know?
Yeah.
Or if you've got a kind of annual policy, is that it's done for the year?
No, if you've got an annual policy, you do, if something changes, you do need to update them. So for example, if I've got my scans coming up this week, and you know, fingers crossed they'll all be fine. But, you know, should something change, I would have to tell my insurer, right, this has changed. And they would advise me accordingly. So a lot of the time they might say, okay, can you let us know, you know, when are you planning to travel? Have you got a holiday booked? And they'd probably understand that first, and then just see, you know, if I had a holiday booked for next week, they'd maybe say, if you didn't have good sands, they might say, well, actually, is it a good idea if you actually go away until you understand what's happening? So yeah, you should always tell them any changes. If nothing changes, then you don't need to tell them.
And so is it worth keeping an annual policy then? You know, if you have secondary cancer, are annual policies something you should take out, or should you be doing it more on a trip by trip basis?
It depends. Again, it depends on cost wise, actually. Sometimes it might be more economical just to do it on a trip by trip basis, because they tend to work out slightly cheaper because they can look at the individual risk of each holiday that each holiday poses. So you get a more tailored price. Whereas when you're taking out an annual policy, people don't know where you're going, when you're going. If you've got a worldwide policy, you could be going anytime. So they can be a little bit more expensive, particularly if you've got a secondary diagnosis.
Okay. Actually, just one question. Is travel insurance a useful thing to have for holidays within the UK?
Yes, absolutely. So again, all of the COVID cover would be handy because you still have to book, you know, you still might be booking in advance and having to cancel accommodation and things like that. The other thing that's UK holiday insurance is really good for is if you're taking out rental accommodation, and any damage you do to that rental property is automatically covered under that travel insurance policy. So I don't know if you've got young kids or you've got animals and they do damage to the property, then that generally can be claimed under your travel insurance. So it's handy to have.
Yeah.
And if you're taken ill at one end of the country, and you're hospitalized and you want to get back home, the UK travel insurance, some of them will also cover a private ambulance to move you, so you can get back to your own hospital, which is quite important to a lot of people.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. Oh, we've got another question. Sorry, I'm just going to read it as I talk because it's quite long, but it's involving traveling to Dublin, Ireland for a wedding in August. Unsure whether I need travel or medical insurance. I've applied for a UK global health insurance card, which states that we're entitled to emergency medical care like A&E.
Yeah.
But I've not got anything for sort of extra medical help. She's got chemo that's been tolerated quite well. Actually, this is Kira. Kira, do you want to say a little bit more? I'm worried I'm not going to do justice to your question. If you're able to, I can.
Hi.
Hi, Kira.
Hi,
Sorry, I just thought it might be easier. I'm going to let you ask the question.
Okay. It's quite a confusing one. Basically, I'm going to Dublin for a wedding in August, and I've applied for the UK Global Health Insurance Card. And on the government page, it says that you're entitled to medical and emergency care like A&E for pre-existing conditions like cancer. So I've been having treatment since August, and I've never needed any A&E help. I've tolerated chemo so well that I literally am up walking, like I'm out the next day going to the gym sort of thing. Like I literally barely have any symptoms whatsoever. I've been very lucky. So I never needed the extra help. So I find it very hard to believe I'm going to need it when I'm on holiday, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I've been quoted like over £300 for it because I am stage 4 incurable, but everything is shrinking. So it's all good, but they're not taking into account maybe the more fine details, I think, of the treatment. So it makes it sound like I'm a lot worse than I am, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I lived in Ireland for 15 years, so I've got what is the national insurance health number over there. And I don't know if that makes any difference. And I'm just wondering, for a week holiday, just going to a wedding, if I need health insurance, or if this global health insurance card that will give me A&E help if I needed it is going to be enough to cover.
Okay, so yeah, it'll give you emergency medical treatment, as you've pointed out, and that's obviously really important, because you could get, you know, suddenly quite sick and quite quickly. So at least that's going to be covered. I think what's not covered under there is if you are, say, taken ill and you would be hospitalized, say, and you need to stay in hospital in Ireland. Now, that might not be a big issue if you've got family there and you're surrounded by your family and everything like that. It maybe doesn't matter. But if you would want to try and get back to the UK and things like that, that's where your travel insurance would probably step in and help you get back to the UK to finish off that treatment if you're able to travel.
Right, okay.
So it's things like that. So, and if you had something that wasn't deemed emergency, but you still needed medical treatment, you could pay privately for it, or your national insurance that you've already got might already pay for that. So you might need, say you might pick up an infection. It's not life-threatening, so you don't need A&E, but you maybe just need some antibiotics.
Right, okay.
Prescribed. That might do, but if not, that's what your travel insurance would be for. I'm surprised it's £300 though for a week's cover. So can I ask who that was with?
I think it was insured with.
Was it?
Yeah, it was someone like that, because I'm technically, I think I'm technically classed as terminal, even though I've had really good response from chemo, and I need to have a chat with my doctor about what technically I would, because I don't know what exactly he would class I have to write it down as anymore, because I've had such good responses, if that makes sense. So I need to have him confirm so that I'm putting the right information on. But yeah, it was over £300. One place quoted me £1,000, and I was like, that's just insane. So
right, okay.
I don't know why, but I honestly, I don't have any side effects, or even side effects of cancer or the chemo, and I know that I won't have any problems over there. So I'm just like, is it worth it? Because it's costing me so much money. I'm like, is the risk worth it if I'm covered with the UK health insurance card for the minor thing?
Yeah,
I think I'm more likely to break a bone over there than I am for anything with cancer.
Yeah. I mean, I think only you can decide if the risk is worth it, and how much money it would cost if you were taken ill and you had to pay for it.
Okay.
But the likelihood, I don't know the ins and outs. If you've got the national insurance number for Ireland anyway, even if you're taken ill and you need non-emergency treatment, that might well be covered anyway.
Right, okay.
So it's about weighing up what exactly you would maybe try and understand what treatment you would be able to get under that to see, because that's where you're going to be hit with the money, is if you fall ill with something that's not emergency related and you need treatment before you return home.
Lovely, thank you very much.
That's what's going to cost you money. All righty, no worries.
Thanks, Fiona. Actually, that just sort of relates to one other question I've just kind of missed in the chat, but how can we, so, you know, we're going onto the internet to look for travel insurance. What should we be looking for? How do we know that we're going to the right place?
So you do need to look for somebody that's a specialist provider. And unfortunately, you know, the people that you might have used all the time, you know, the big travel insurance names, and, you know, the likelihood is that they're not going to be, they might not even cover your cancer. And if they do, it might be really, really expensive. So you do need to look for a specialist provider. So the Money and Pensions Advice Service have set up something called the MAPS directory, Travel Insurance Directory, and that is a list of specialist travel insurance providers that should be able to offer people quotes even with complex and terminal conditions. I'd be really interested for anybody to give me their feedback on that. I also, it's in another life, I also work with the access to insurance on the Charities and Consumer Reference Group with regards to the setting up of the MAPS service. And we want to ensure that it is set up for what it was meant to be, which is to make finding travel insurance after a cancer diagnosis easier. Now, bearing in mind the likes of Insurance With and World First, at the moment, we're not offering cover because there's some regulatory issues to do with us changing our insurer. But there are other providers on the MAP service, and I'll send Kywin the link that she can share with everybody. But I'd be really keen to understand your experience with the MAP service. Did it offer you a good price? Was it simple to use? Again, it's something we want to encourage more of what you like and discourage more of what's bad about it, as I say. And it'd be good to get your feedback. If anybody's got time to do that, that'd be really helpful.
Great.
But I'll send Kywin the link that she can share with everybody.
So I think there's a couple of other questions. If anyone wants to put their hand up, I can come to you. Emily, okay, Emily, Dom, and I think Shamir had a question. So Shamir, can I go to you first, and then we'll go to Emily and then to Dom?
Yeah, sure, yeah. Hi, Fiona.
Hi, Shamir.
So I had my cancer 10 years ago. I've got the all clear for 9 years now.
Yeah.
So how long would I need to put it on the insurance when I'm going for travel insurance? How long would I need to put it on the form for, if that makes sense?
You do need to just read and ask and answer what they ask. So some companies might say, have you been diagnosed with cancer in the last 5 years? Some might be 10, or some might say, have you ever been diagnosed with cancer? So you just need to truthfully answer what they ask.
Okay,
so that's
perfect. Okay.
Yeah, it's just checking that you're answering that bit correctly, and then they might ask you more questions about it, or they might not.
Yeah, and just one more question, sorry. So I've recently had another DVT in my leg.
Yeah.
Luckily it was found early, so they managed to get rid of it in medicine stuff. But would I need to put that on the form as well? Or
yes, because they tend to ask you if you've had any medical treatment within the last 2 years. So that would come under that. So yeah, you would need to.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Declare that. You're welcome.
Emily, can we go to you?
Sorry, I was on mute. There are two bits. Firstly, like I had a weird experience where I've just been diagnosed last year with secondary, and like you, I'm on Palbo, where it's like technically chemo, but I don't feel anything like chemo, so I don't know how that's going to go when I start trying again. I used to get annual insurance with All Clear. The reason I got annual is because I'm half American. American insurance is very expensive. I was always going, I just got it all the time. They always covered me. I mean, in between my chemo and my surgery, like once I found them, they covered my dad when he was dying of lung disease. They really covered me. I always was able to get a policy with them. But the thing that slightly worries me, obviously I haven't gone back since I was secondary, but I never claimed.
Yeah.
So I know I think I tried to check that they had a big underwriter, like it's big, but how do you know they're a decent company? Because they always seem to cover me. They always seem to be like less expensive than everyone else. And I'm just, part of my brain is thinking, is this because there's a problem?
Yeah,
Why?
No, so every travel insurer in the UK is regulated by the FCA. So if they weren't bona fide and wouldn't pay claims, they wouldn't be regulated by the FCA, and they wouldn't be able to sell policies.
Okay, fine.
So we are really heavily regulated in the UK. So just because you haven't had to make a claim doesn't mean that they won't pay your claim. It just means that, as I say, that there is a myth that you're not going to be able to get affordable travel insurance, and it is available, as you know. But as your risk changes, they might not be the best for you. So then to look around, but don't just give up. There is other options for you. If they become too expensive, then there's other places to look. But while you're happy paying that, then go with it. And I can absolutely allay your fears about claims being paid. They will be.
Sorry, the other part of the question. So my first cancer was 6 years ago, and I had a lot of side effects after chemo and things like that. My list, every time we did the policy every year, there's like 1,500 questions, because then they say, have you had a DVT? Yes. Have you had a UTI? Yes. Have you had a, back slip disc? Yes. you know, I had every like other bit of the thing. And now I'm wondering, so now I don't have a lot of those side effects. That's most of them were like 5 years ago. So, but then I have a new set. So am I still putting all the old set on and the new set, or because it's like been 3 years, I don't have to worry about the old set, because if I get a slip disc this time, it's not going to be related to the slip disc from the first cancer. And you know, I don't know, like I'm just ending up writing, I mean, hundreds of pages, and you know, by the end I'm thinking, you're never going to insure me because I've just told you I'm basically like a walking.
No, because again, it's not about, you know, people are scared to declare everything because they think I'm going to be completely uninsurable. But all you're doing is giving the insurer a full picture of your medical health.
Okay.
Now, you just need to, again, as I said to Shamir, just answer the questions truthfully. Okay. So if they say, have you had a slip disc in the last 5 years? You answer yes. If it's in the last 3 years, you would say no.
Okay.
Because that's what they've asked you.
Right.
So you just need to be truthful with your answers and make sure that you're answering them accurately.
Okay.
And as I say, just because you've got a length, the length of your arm doesn't mean you're going to be uninsurable.
Okay, thank you.
And I would say also, you know, if just from my own personal experience, there have been times where actually the way that the questions on the computer have come through aren't necessarily directly relevant or really clear to my own situation, and I've just phoned them up. And that, I mean, that's not always easy, and I think it does sometimes, you know, it can take a lot out of you if you're dealing with quite a lot of traumatic illness, right? So you kind of have to brace yourself for it. But I think if you're getting confused with this stuff on the computer, to call them and just talk to them, and they can, either the person you speak to can help you, or they can put you through to an underwriter as well who can help you in more detail. Yeah,
no, that's great advice, Kywin. Is always, if you're struggling with it online, just pick up the phone. Somebody will be able to help you and talk you through the online journey, or if that's too confusing, bring you offline and you can talk to a medical underwriter and chat it through that way.
So Dom, I know you've been waiting patiently. You've got a question.
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions. Just wondering what kind of scientific literature and statistics underwriters are working from, because if they look at whatever the average prognosis for my type of cancer, they'll think, okay, this guy's going to maybe die on holiday. Are they being very conservative, or are they kind of, how much leeway is there?
Well, they're actually looking at their own stats, because it's about not insuring your life, but insuring your holiday. It's how what's the likelihood of you falling ill on holiday or needing to cancel that holiday before you go? So that's what they're having a look at, and it's about understanding the individual. So we all react differently to our cancer and our cancer treatment. Some you know, like Kira was saying, she feels absolutely fine after a chemotherapy. There'll be some people that go through that very same chemotherapy that it floors for 3 weeks of every 4. And we all react differently. So it's about, that's one of the reasons why we started to develop our own medical screening, is so we could understand more about the person rather than just their diagnosis, on how they're actually coping with their diagnosis, because that's really, really important. You know, you might have somebody that runs every day, works full time, being diagnosed with secondary cancer with a life expectancy of 2 years, but they still keep really healthy, compared to somebody that has the exact same diagnosis but can't move out of bed. That's they're completely different risks, but they might have the same diagnosis. So it's actually about trying to understand the person.
So they use
the diagnosis.
They use the data from all the previous customers who had the same type of cancer.
The same type of cancer, and then they would have a look back and see what the claims experience was.
Okay.
So, and the likelihood is, to be honest with you, the likelihood of making a claim on holiday for somebody with medical conditions like ours isn't as high as you might think, because we're very, very good at managing our own condition. So whereas somebody that has never been diagnosed with a medical condition before, if they feel really ill or a bit dizzy, can't get out of bed, they would immediately call a doctor, might, you know, rock up at A&E. we would tend to go, all right, I know what this is, my blood pressure is a bit low, and we manage our condition. We've probably got some antibiotics or tablets that we know we can take to help us. So the likelihood of us making, these what we would class as minor type claims, medical claims, but it still involves a hospital administration and maybe some fluid, it is far less likely than somebody that's never had a medical condition. So there's all that going for us. I mean, and where we do cost the insurer money is if something big happens, but that's the same with anybody. It's not just exclusive for people with medical conditions.
Okay, then the second question is about types of medication. Do certain types of medication immediately just kind of shoot the premium up? And what about off-label medications, if you know much about that? So I've recently got involved with a sort of patient-funded study about the effects of off-label medications to sort of inhibit the growth of cancer. So I'm taking like a sort of diabetes medication and a sort of anti-parasitic medication.
But is that on a medical trial?
It's not. I don't think it's technically a trial. I think it's just a study. It's a private clinic, and.
But it is a study, and you are being monitored by a doctor on this.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So you would still need to declare that you're on those medications, but not for the. So you don't have diabetes, basically.
Yeah.
But you would still need to do that. You would probably need a conversation with a medical underwriter to explain that, because they're not going to be able to do that on an online system. But that's where it's handy that you can come off and talk to a medical underwriter, because this is happening more and more. They're discovering that there's more and more medications out there that actually help other conditions and not the ones that they're designed for. I think COVID's a case in point. There's loads of drugs that they're thinking, actually, this works for COVID. So it's not as unusual as you might think. And no, that wouldn't preclude you from getting affordable travel insurance.
Okay, cool, thanks.
Okay.
Thanks, Fiona. Well, listen, we are out of time. It's 2:00. The hour has flown by. Thank you so much.
It has, hasn't it?
Just before we go, what should your first step be if you are looking for travel insurance online with a pre-existing condition? If you were going to go to Google, where would you go?
Okay. So what I always recommend is don't use every comparison site in the market. Pick one comparison site and run a quote through. And that should be your base. So you can understand, okay, that's what these are offering. And then I would, normally I'd recommend finding a travel insurance provider that uses Protective, because they're not used on comparison sites. And then you can judge, and then you can see the two base premiums in the market. Unfortunately, as I say, the underwriters that underwrite the Protective products, we're not selling at the moment because we're changing insurer. So in the meantime, I would still do the online, just pick one comparison site, do an online quote, and then check out the Money and Pensions Advice Service Travel Insurance Directory. And I'll send you the link for that, Kaiwen, that you can share with everybody. And feedback on that would be really great. If you can email it to me, and I think Kaiwen's going to give out my email address.
I will send everyone who's attended today an email, and I'll put Fiona's email in it as well as the link, and then you guys can come back to us. But thank you so much to everyone for joining us. Fiona, thank you for sharing your. It's
been lovely. Yeah, I've really enjoyed it. I hope you found it useful. And